I'm recording. All right, so we're gonna get started. Okay, great. So today we're talking about evaluating sources for research. So there's various sources you can use for research, primarily pretty much the two main categories that we are thinking of when we talk about this is popular sources and scholarly sources. So those are the two I'm gonna be talking about. There are different varieties like, trade documents and things like that that don't necessarily fall under either of those, but for the most part, those are the ones you're probably going to be looking at the most when doing research. So why do we need to evaluate sources? So first, it's because we want to use good sources because it can support the validity of your argument. So whether in an assignment or an essay, using a good source will make whatever point you're trying to make stronger and more valid. It keeps you aware of the state of the field. So when you're looking at quality sources, you're also looking at what everyone's talking about and what everyone considers to be the best info in the field. So that's important. It also allows you to participate in the scholarly conversation. Oh, I forgot my AC's on. Oh, I hope that's not too loud. It helps you to participate in the scholarly conversation, and it supports your efforts to get published. So if you were going to write an article or anything like that that you did want to submit to a journal, you do need to use quality resources in order to get published. So popular sources are intended for a general audience, so they're written typically to entertain, inform, or persuade, and popular sources will help you answer who, what, when, and where questions, and they're essential for finding information about current events and issues. So examples of this would be magazines, newspapers, blogs, or social media. So pretty much anything that's like not, sorry, didn't mean to spit there, super academic in its presentation. And again, I think I said before, but anything like this, it doesn't mean the information in there isn't valid or valuable. It just means you need to look at it with a grain of salt, but really you should be doing that with just about anything. So when do you want to use popular sources? So they're good for gathering and establishing background info. Like, for example, I know you've probably been told your whole academic career that you don't want to use Wikipedia, and that's true as far as like putting it in as a source in essays, but sometimes if you're looking at a topic that you just don't understand and you just need like the basic info on it, looking at something like Wikipedia can be really helpful. And one of the nice things about Wikipedia is it will cite where it gets info from, so then you can kind of go and see those cited sources and kind of continue down the rabbit hole basically. But stuff like that's really great for establishing background info, even if it might not be something that you would put into a paper. And it can also help you establish cultural feelings on a topic. So especially things like social issues or political issues, you can kind of get an idea of like what the general feeling is in a country or anything like that on a certain topic. But yeah, they shouldn't be used to defend your thesis or bolster your argument necessarily, and they shouldn't be the only type of resource you use, unless your professor only wants you to use popular sources, which could definitely happen, but I don't know. I don't remember that ever happening when I was an undergrad, but could be a possibility. So scholarly sources are typically written by experts, so it's going to be someone with a master's or a PhD in the field. They're going to contain original research, so usually they're like positing some sort of idea or they've done their own research on the topic. Oh man, I forgot. People are also doing construction. Both condos underneath me are like, there's like so much construction going on right now. It's insane. So yeah, they contain original research. They cite other sources extensively through the work, and they're going to have a works cited page usually at the bottom. And they typically use academic or complex language, which, does speak to the validity, even though I do think sometimes a lot of academic articles are not always the most well written, I would argue, but people love jargon. So they're published by a scholarly press that practices editorial review, otherwise known as peer review, and they're intended for an audience composed of researchers, scholars, academics, and other informed or specialized readerships. That's why if you've ever read an article in like EBSCO or JSTOR or anything, you might notice that like they don't always dwell too much on background info, and that's primarily because they're assuming their audience kind of already has a base knowledge on the topic. So types of scholarly sources would be considered peer-reviewed articles or academic books, and those are usually collections of articles on a certain theme or subjects. They're going to be about a topic, or maybe like it's going to be a collection of articles about Hamlet by Shakespeare, things like that. And so what do you want to remember when evaluating sources? So I really like the CRAP test, partly because I feel like the name is memorable, but it's also just like a good tool to use. So the CRAP test is basically you want to consider 5 things: currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. So for currency, it's the timeliness of the information. So are you looking at something that is recently published, or are you looking at something that like is from like the 70s or something? And like, are you looking at something that is maybe a recent thing in the field, like a lot of like COVID-19 studies being done right now, or is it something that's maybe had a little bit more time to get looked at? You also want to look at relevance, like the importance of the information for your needs. So apparently that's like if the source isn't relevant to whatever you need, why continue reading it? And also, I think you can also apply that to if the article like seems to have a clear, like relevant line of thinking. That can also help you know if the source is good or not. And also authority, so who is writing the who's providing the information basically. So is it, you know, someone who knows a lot about the topic? Is it someone who might have like a certain agenda that they're trying to push, things like that? And this can be like really widely applied. Like for example, local news versus like a major news network. Like sometimes if a story seems a little like vague or odd in like a major news network, sometimes if you check like the local news, you can get a lot more info on the topic. For example, back when I was a student at UC Irvine, there was a big hullabaloo about like a flag, an American flag getting taken down in like a building, and then that got picked up by like a major news network, and they made it sound like someone went and like ripped a flag off of a flagpole, which definitely had not happened. And I only it sticks out in my mind because then I got confronted by one of my cousin's husbands about it at a party, and I was like, that news network like didn't do any fact checking. And I mean, it was like a flag to get taken out, but it was like a completely smaller isolated event that wasn't a big deal. But yeah, they really made it sound like every single American flag had gotten removed from the campus, and that was not the case. It was very awkward at that party, but so it goes. So that's something to consider. And also that leads into accuracy. So the reliability, truthfulness, and correctness of the content. So is it something that seems like they've fact checked? Is it something that seems, you know, vetted and properly sourced, all that good stuff. And then purpose. So why does the information exist? So again, is it something where it's trying to convince you? Is it just objectively presenting the info? All good things to consider. And then, oh, okay, so this is, okay, let's see if this works because I'm a little nervous.
But the sweetener industry is not going to take the findings of a wet, confused rat lying down. They are an immensely powerful...
Oh, wow. I realized I was so excited to show this. I didn't explain what this is. So this is an example of industry bias in science research from Last Week Tonight by John Oliver. So I'll just start playing it again.
$5 billion industry who fought for decades to project their product's health benefits. The Sugar Association used to claim their product was a diet aid, with ads positioning it as a cure for the fat time of day, with a woman saying, if sugar can fill that hollow feeling, I'm all for it. Because yes, nothing says I don't feel hollow inside like a woman sitting alone eating straight from a bag of sugar. Now, the Sugar Association has gotten a little more sophisticated since then. Here is their current president.
As it relates to obesity, there's been plenty of science that exonerates sugar, that clarifies sugar does not contribute to obesity or diabetes.
Really? Sugar doesn't contribute to obesity? I'm not saying it's the only culprit, but it's definitely one of the key suspects. Asking what causes obesity is a bit like asking who killed a first-grade class's hamster. Sure, they all killed it in a way, but I think we all know one of them killed it the most. I'm talking to you, Kevin. You killed that hamster, and you drove your father away. There, I said it. I said it, Kevin. I said it. Although, to be fair, take him down. To be fair, there are some scientists who dismiss links between sugars and obesity. For instance, this guy.
We take a complex situation like obesity and we say, well, if we could just cut down on sugar-sweetened beverages or added sugars in general, that would solve obesity. And I think that is a very slippery slope and almost certainly wrong.
That is Dr. James Rippey, who, like Clamato juice, turns out to contain quite a lot of hidden sugar himself. He's on the payroll of the Corn Refiners Association, the corn syrup people, and at one point he was receiving a $41,000 a month retainer from them. That's $500,000 a year. For that much money, you'd expect much grander claims than it doesn't link to obesity. He should be saying, my research finds that corn syrup makes you an immortal sex god with X-ray vision. And I'm not saying that corporate money distorts science, but when researchers looked at two sets of weight gain studies, one group with conflicts of interest, like funding from soda companies, and one group that was independent, the vast majority of independent studies found direct links between sugar-sweetened soft drinks and weight gain or obesity, and the vast majority that weren't independent found the exact opposite of that. Particularly suspicious was a research paper titled, "I'm So Delicious," attributed to a Dr. Pepper.
Okay, cool. So, oopsies. Yeah, so that's an example of industry bias and kind of how, like, depending on who is, you know, funding research, that can skew results. It's always something to kind of look out for when you're doing research. Why is this not full screen? There we go. Okay, cool. So, what do you want to look for in scholarly sources? So this is very similar to the CRAP test, but I just wanted to like kind of talk about specifically, since you'll probably be using, oh geez, wow, a lot of scholarly sources in your work. So one thing is author, again, just making sure that they are a you know, expert in the field. Data publications, so again, is it recent, is it old, you know, is it from the 50s, could it have historical bias, that sort of thing. Has it been edited or revised? So especially if you're looking at books, wow, collections like textbooks or collected articles, that sort of thing. If it has been revised or if it's a multiple edition, typically that will show that the work has been updated frequently, so you can kind of read into that and think that like it's probably any info and it's probably up to date. Or if there's multiple editions, it's probably a pretty popular title if they've continued to put it out, so that can also speak to the validity of the source. Also the publisher, so is it like an academic journal or an academic publisher? The title of the journal, you know, is it an academic title essentially, or like, you know, what kind of journal is it? And then intended audience, so typically for scholarly sources it's going to be other people in the field, but you always want to consider that when you're reading it, who's this for? And then also objective reasoning, you know, does there appear to be bias, or are they kind of just like laying out the facts? Coverage, and then writing style, so is it, oh, coverage, sorry, skip past that. That's like, you know, how much of the topic does it cover? Is it very narrow? Is it very broad? That sort of thing. Writing style, so that's going to be, is it clear and concise, or is it all over the place? You know, kind of the quality of the writing sometimes can also speak to how great the source is. And then reviews. So this is specifically mostly for books. If you're kind of wanting to know how that was like accepted into the field, you can look up book reviews, especially on academic books, and kind of see what people think of the book. So those are all great things to look for. And then when in doubt, fact check. So you can, these are just various websites that you can go to kind of look up things. Most of them are actually for, or like 3 of them are for political things, and then the others are kind of science and other are based on other things. So yeah, that is the whole presentation. So it was about 18 minutes. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing and stop recording. Does anyone have